Welcome to Wadsworth History on Film, a program produced for the Wadsworth Area Historical Society, and we are doing this for posterity so that people from years from now will know who Paul Bicksler is. Paul Bicksler is our guest today, and he's our guest because he comes from a family that had a business here in Wadsworth for about 100, how many years?
107.
107 years. That's a long time.
Yes, it is.
It's a long time. As a matter of fact, this month, 100 years ago this month, rural electricity came to Wadsworth. So this is a good time for us to be doing it, 100 years,
Yep.
100-year anniversary. Paul, tell us a little bit about yourself. Everyone knows who the Bicksler family is. Everyone knows where Bicksler's used to be. Everyone knows the Bickslers isn't there anymore and all those other kinds of things. But let's tell us who Paul was. Start with where you were born and all of those kinds. You can skip prenatal.
Okay. Well, I will have to skip that because I'm not aware of that. But
You're not aware of that.
But no, I graduated from Wadsworth High School in 1973. I started working actually for my two uncles, Wes, Bruce Bicksler, and my dad in 1971. I was a sophomore in high school. And at that time,
your dad was Eldon.
Eldon, nicknamed Beef. He was a big
called
guy.
him. I never called him Eldon in my life. I always called him Beef.
But the store at that time was located in what is now the parking lot of CIS school.
Right.
And so that's where I started. And then it was in the early 80s, I want to say 82 or 83, we moved up to the 114 High Street location, which we were there until I retired last June. So we're coming up on about a year that I've been retired. But I had basically 51 years at the business.
51 years.
51 years.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when I first remember the Bicksler store, it was on College Street.
And there's still a stone marker up above on that.
1914.
No, that one is 1924.
1924?
That was Grandpa's second store. Yeah,
Oh, it was the second
that was
store?
his second store.
Okay.
But yeah, there's a stone up above there that's still dated.
1914.
But that's the year he started, was 1914.
Yeah.
And then basically back during the Depression, he almost lost the business, but he did keep it open. And after the Depression, of course, it flourished pretty well.
Oh, it surely did.
He did a lot of electrical work in this town, that's for sure. Most of the schools
And,
and banks.
As I mentioned here earlier, this is the 100th anniversary of rural electrification of Wadsworth. Now, at one time, before 1922, we had some electricity because it was generated in 1916. It was generated up on Broad Street with an electric generator that was run by steam, and we had a few houses that had electricity. Now, you'll appreciate this. When they put the new houses in, or the new electrical services in, they ran it with two wires with the, what kind of coating did they have? Kind of a cloth coating or whatever?
Like
cloth coating that would disintegrate into the sun very, very quickly. And then when we had a storm, the two wires would click back and forth and cause sparks and scare the living daylights out of people because they had never seen sparks from electricity because we didn't have electricity around. So from that point on, we started putting wires into houses and so forth, and this is probably where your grandfather really got his start. Could you tell us a little bit about his early life and perhaps going with your uncles and then your dad? Your dad was the youngest of the four boys.
Grandpa actually, he started working down at the injector when he was still he only had an 8th grade education.
He was lucky to have that.
Well, back then I think it was more the norm. But he went to work after that. He was a water boy down at the Ohio injector. Then he took some correspondence classes on electricity, and that's when he kind of got started into that. And a few years later, they started coming out with home appliances, and so he got into that, as soon as they were developed.
Now, when you talk about home appliances, we're not talking about the 50 or 60 that you have at your house right now.
No.
What were the first home appliances? Do you remember?
Well, refrigeration.
Refrigeration
was big.
was one.
Yeah, the old monitor top refrigerators.
But tell us about the monitor top and why we had a monitor top rather than the
That I'm not really, I mean, a lot of those had, you know, mustard gas and stuff like that in them because we actually had one in our warehouse, an old one that we had taken in, and it set off our alarm system, and the city of Seville had to come out and get into the warehouse, and he said if we knew what it was, as soon as, he said we took the refrigerator and threw it right off the dock, but it had started leaking. He said, and that stuff is poisonous.
You better believe it is.
Yeah.
Mustard gas is what they used to kill soldiers
Yeah,
with.
yeah.
Yeah. How old were you when your grandfather died?
Let's see, he passed away in, I want to say it was 71, so I would have been a sophomore in high school. I'd have been about 16.
So you remember him pretty well.
I worked at his house, and you know what his yard was like.
Oh, I see.
I mean, we worked up there in the summertime 5 days a week. He was pretty meticulous, and
Oh, yeah.
if there was a weed in that grass, you didn't poison it. You got down on your hands and knees and you dug it out.
You dug it out.
You know, I don't know if you remember, but he had like the golf course type mower where it was, I mean, he mowed that lawn like it was a putting green.
Yeah.
You know?
Tell us a little bit about your grandfather's personality and a little bit about his expectations and
Well,
how he reared four boys who were.
He was very particular. Things had to be done right. I never worked with him. He had retired right before I started working down there. But I talked to guys that worked with him, and they said the thing that they would never forget about Grandpa, they'd all be sitting down eating lunch, and your grandfather would be up there eating a sandwich with one hand and twisting wire nuts with the other hand.
Yep.
They said the man never sat down.
Yep. That's what I remember about
Yep.
him, is always on the go.
Mm-hmm.
Now, he wasn't what you would call politically correct in all the kinds of things because he just said what he felt.
Yeah.
I can still remember his being very, very direct and probably not, I mean, he's always nice.
Mm-hmm.
Matter of fact, I never saw him angry.
No.
Never saw him angry.
Yeah. And I don't know if you remember, but he had that tree farm up there on West Street,
Yes.
too, because he used to sell Christmas trees, and he had that property up to, well, butted up right against West Street Park up there.
Well, what do we call that street that's up there now?
Well, the one behind it is Bicksler Drive, which he developed that. And supposedly, the story I heard is he was buying that property up during the Depression. And everybody said, what are you doing? You can't barely keep the business open and you're buying this property. And as we know, it turned into be a great investment for him.
Oh,
Yeah.
it surely was, yes.
Yeah.
When I was going to centralized, this would have been 85 years ago now, going to centralized, that was nothing but farmland.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, there was just nothing there, nothing, zero, not even a house or anything at all.
Well, of course, we grew up there on right at the end of Euclid Drive. You'd drive right into our driveway, but we'd walk out our backyard, go across Bicksler Drive, and that total development, there was nothing there.
Zero.
Nothing. You could walk right down to Holmesbrook Valley.
That's
Yep.
exactly right.
There was
yeah.
not a thing in that field.
Now, tell us a little bit about your three uncles.
Well, of course, all of them were in the service back during the war.
We all were.
Bert, back in the 60s, moved to California. He was also working at the store, but he went out there and he worked for Lockheed Martin and McDonnell Douglas. He retired from all the aircraft companies out there. He used to work on the Apollo engines, you know, for the Apollo rockets, because his son would tell me that Bert would call him and say, hey, look up in the sky tonight at such and such a time. We're testing, you know. So Bert was a pretty smart guy.
Oh, yeah.
And
There were
Wes,
dumb
and
ones,
of course,
there were
you
no
know,
dumb ones.
Bruce kind of ran the wiring department, and Uncle Wes, he kind of handled the office and everything, and my dad handled sales. So I really got to work with all of them except for Uncle Bert.
Well, then you worked for your dad, though, too.
I did. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm just trying to think. I bought the business from my father back in, oh gosh, the early 90s, sometime in the early 90s, you know.
Now, there are no Bicksler. You're the only Bicksler left, aren't you?
Well, I have a brother that's in Florida.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, I have a brother that's
You have
in
a
Florida.
brother. What's his name?
Gary.
Gary.
Mm-hmm.
Older or younger?
He's 4 years younger.
4 years younger. So
Yeah.
I didn't know him. Now, before we get too far, how about telling us about who you really are? I mean, we understand that you graduated in 1983. You said
73.
73.
Mm-hmm.
1973. And that you went to Wadsworth High School, and obviously you were born then 53 or 4. You were born.
54.
You were born in 54.
Born in 54.
54. Yes,
Yes.
I'm sorry. Yeah, 54. Do my addition here, right? My subtraction. 1954.
In the old Wadsworth Hospital.
And Wadsworth Hospital, the old Wadsworth
The old
Hospital. That's right, exactly. And tell us who your mother was.
Her maiden name was Juanita Brown.
Brown.
Right.
Juanita Brown. And your grandmother. No. Yeah. Yes, your grandmother. And her maiden name was what?
Well, Helen and Wayne Good actually raised my mother. They took my mother in and they raised her all the way through high school. But, yeah, it was Helen Good.
And now, who were the Goods?
Well, Wayne had the Sparkle Market up on 261. And just trying to think, Wayne's probably been gone for about 10 years now, 10 or 12 years, but he ran a very good, grocery business up there.
Yeah. And what about the other Goods?
That part of I didn't know too many of his brothers and stuff.
Well, there are a lot of them.
Yeah, I know.
They're all over the place.
There were, yeah.
There were everything from farmers to entrepreneurs and all good people, funeral directors, furniture people. What else? Just about anything that you can think of. Now, let's go to the end, and then we're going to come back to the beginning.
Sure.
What really made you want to? Well, no, not want to. What really made you want to close the store?
Everything just kind of fell in line. We were having trouble getting product, which that has not changed. We were watching it on the news yesterday, and they're saying if you're building a new home, you need to plan about 10 to 12 months ahead of time to get appliances because...
That's right, exactly.
Yeah. My landlord was going to raise the rent, which he told me the only reason, he said I'd raised everybody's rent except for yours last year. He said I didn't raise yours last year because your check comes in a week early. Every month. And I said, well, isn't that worth something? Peace of mind, Doug? And he said, well, I had to put a new floor in your store. Of course, his tenant flooded me. So that was going to happen. And then I had a second stent put in my heart about a year ago. Good news is it was the same artery. Bad news is the one they put in 6 months prior collapsed.
Wow.
But I went back to work the next day, and one of the guys called off, and I ended up on the delivery truck on a 90-degree day delivering refrigerators. And I just got to thinking that day, you know what? It's time. I've been here 51 years. It's time to, think about retiring.
Wow.
Because I went home that night, and my son said, they're going to carry you out in a gurney. I said, no, they're not. He says, yes, they are. He said, every time you have a surgery, you're back at work too quick. And he says, so they'll carry you out in a gurney. I says, no, I said, I'm going to retire. And they all started laughing. I said, the guy that works 6 days a week is going to retire. I said, I am. I said, I did some soul searching today. And my wife said, well, we've got all that inventory in the warehouse. I said, Annie, there's no inventory in the United States. I said, I can dump that in 6 months. And we did it. And I had sold my warehouse over in Seville. So that was a big plus because my property taxes were $6,000 a year on that building.
Wow.
And so it was, that lucked out. I sold that piece of property, and we didn't own our retail establishment. We'd been renting up there. So everything just kind of came in line. And of course, they're going to reconfigure the downtown, which I've seen the final plan. It looks beautiful. But we know when they start this project for 2 to 3 years, it's going to be pretty tough, because they're doing water and sewer lines and everything. And I told Annie, my wife, I said, you know what, it's time. So we did it. And it was, Caesar, it got real hard during COVID. It was hard to find people that wanted to work. That was the other issue.
Yeah.
It just seemed like nobody wanted to work anymore.
It's still that way.
And that has not changed too much. They say that our unemployment's at an all-time low right now, but every place you look at, there's signs in the window, now hiring all positions. So I don't think too much of that has changed.
Now you mentioned a girl's name there.
My wife, Annie?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, she
Tell
actually.
us about Annie.
Yeah, well, I met her through our accountant, actually. And that's how we met. And I was getting my taxes done one year, and I come out of the office, and she says, well, you're getting a nice return. She says, where are you going to take me to dinner? I said, I'm not taking you to dinner anywhere. I said, I'm paying my bills off. And I guess I broke her heart.
You said that?
I said that to her, and then I asked her out on a date about a week later.
I thought we had more.
Well, I don't know. That was my reaction, but anyway, it worked out well, and we've been together about 35 years now.
You did take her out though, right?
We did. Yep.
Instead of paying your bills, you took her out.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Where did you go?
We went to dinner. Place up in Akron, Larry's Crab Legs. That's their special on Wednesday nights,
and that's what you did.
That's what we did. That was our first date.
And that it's been
35 years ago. Yeah.
What about your family?
Well, of course, Drew is the one that's videotaping us right now.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And of course, Drew we adopted from an orphanage over in Russia when he was a baby, so that was 22 years ago, which actually at that time Putin had just taken over. And his one buddy was running Yugoslavia, the guy that was killing everybody over there. And right before we left to pick Drew up, they were talking of bombing what used to be Yugoslavia. So we'd been over there for about 10 days, and we got back into Moscow with Drew the day before, and I got up in the morning and I looked out the window and they're burning U.S. and NATO flags.
Uh-oh.
And we get a tap on the door. It's our interpreter. And she came in, she said, I want to explain to you what's going on. She says, the United States bombed Yugoslavia yesterday. She said, the embassy that you were in yesterday, the U.S. embassy, they threw a hand grenade through the window this morning. She said, it did not detonate, but they shot the windows full of bullet holes. She says, you're not supposed to leave till Wednesday, but I just left the airport, and for $500 a ticket more, we can get you out of here tomorrow night. So I bought the tickets and we left. Wow. But they were scared to death of him when we were over there. But like they said, you don't talk bad against the man. If you do, you will come up missing, or your family will come up missing. And evidently, not a whole lot's changed in that end of it.
Not at all.
So we got Drew in a much better life. And we were actually going to go back to Russia to adopt him a sibling to grow up with. But they changed their laws all the time. And Russia had changed the law where I'd have to fly over and spend 30 days the first trip, which that means you're in their hotels for 30 days and they're getting the American money for the hotel room and everything. Then you have to fly back to the United States, wait for 90 days, then me and Annie would have to get on the plane, fly over, get the baby, but we have to spend another 30 days over there, which means I've got a business over here that I can't leave for 30 days. So we decided to go to Guatemala, and we went to Guatemala, and we got Olivia. She was about the same age. She was 10 or 11 months old at the same time. So we got her 4 years later.
So you have two children then?
And my daughter is actually graduating this year.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Which I told her, I said, to give you a little idea how old your dad is, I said, if you were graduating next year, I'd be sitting right there with the 50-year-old class.
50-year-old class, right.
She laughed. But I got two great kids.
Oh, you do? There's no question about that. Now tell us what your daughter does.
Well, she has been taking a forensic science class over in Barberton for the last 2 years. And she's done really well in it. In fact, she was sergeant of the class last year. She was lieutenant of the class this year. Tomorrow night she's getting inducted into that Hall of Fame or honor roll. And she's getting a big scholarship. And then she's in the honor roll here. So she's got pretty good grades. And she took a test for the state of Ohio, and she did really well on it, and she's certified in 7 different categories now. So she wants to go to the University of Akron and get into criminal science, but she's thinking of getting into like an internship as a dispatcher because she's already got the credit. She's got, I think, 17 credit hours for college already, and she's already cleared that end of it. So she's thinking of maybe doing that and going to school part-time at the same time to get the rest of her credits.
Oh, wow. That's just really impressive.
Yep. But she's done really well in the class, and she's really interested in it. She loves the forensic science end of it, and she said they've been going through Homeland Security lately, and she said that's another area that she's really interested in.
I'm sure. Does she, you got her from Guatemala, you
Guatemala,
say?
correct.
But now, was she an orphan or what?
She was, but she had foster parents down there. And to give you a little idea, her and Drew were exactly the same age when we adopted them. She was 22 pounds at about a year of age. Drew was 8 pounds. They didn't have a lot of nutrition over there. They had no dairy product, so he was, having soy formula. But basically, they told us at the orphanage that he got a bottle of soy formula for breakfast, a bowl of porridge for his noontime feeding, and another bottle of that soy formula. So when we brought him back here, we didn't even know if his system would accept milk, but after he had milk, he wanted nothing to do with the soy formula.
I can imagine.
But he's gotten very healthy, as you can see, and he wasn't growing for a long time. And in fact, Children's Hospital told us his total height might be 4'7" to 4'8". And we took him back up to Dr. Owenschlager the following year, and in 1 year he grew 13 inches in height, and he went from a size 6 shoe to a 10 and a half.
Wow.
He's an inch taller than I am.
Oh, that is so good.
Oh, the doctor couldn't believe. He said, I've never seen anybody grow this fast in a year. He says, you're going through a lot of clothes. I said, a lot of clothes and a lot of shoes.
And you don't mind it?
No.
You don't mind it at
but
all?
He's good and healthy now, so that's good.
Paul, you started out when, shall we say, things were fairly normal. Then you went through the 60s and the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, and little by little things got tougher and tougher and tougher. Can you give us some of the feelings that you had to have? And I'll give you a little one just right now for the present time. Our dishwasher went bad. I think it's been maybe 3 or 4 weeks. It needs a computer. We've been washing dishes by hand, and we expect to wash dishes by hand for quite some time. What on earth is happening?
Too many parts are being imported from China and Mexico. We build the product, a lot of the product's built here in the United States, but the parts are coming from abroad. And that's when we saw the $399, what used to be a $399 washer, jumped up to $649, and it was the same washer. So it was a heck of an increase,
Yeah, it is. Well,
And I'm sure transportation has a lot to do with that,
well,
with the
probably,
price of
yeah,
gasoline
yeah.
and everything today.
What did that do to the business?
Well, I guess it didn't. It was hard to control your inventory. That was the hardest thing to do. You'd order stuff and say you came in for a new house and you'd order it. Well, you're ready for the appliances. Well, maybe everything came in but the dishwasher. And it used to be, if I would order on a Monday, I'd have the product in about 2 days. It'd be at the back door. So it's definitely changed.
Well, actually, the reason the person gave us, the repair person, he said that he put the order in immediately. He said, it could be here by tomorrow morning, or it could be here another 6 or 8 months from now. Well, somewhere, somebody has to fix that.
Well, we've got to start manufacturing more of the components, I think, over here.
Well, how could you run a business doing that?
I don't know.
But you had to do it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we weren't the only one. I mean, it was everybody. Everybody that was, all my competitors were running through the same thing.
I mean, I'm not talking about you personally, but I mean, how would anyone run a business that way? Now, I had to do a little historical thing for one of the organizations. They asked me to give the historical background on the rural electrification, which is 100 years. As we're speaking today, it's 100 years this month that rural electrification came to Wadsworth. At the time, in 1922, when your dad had already started business here in town, at the time, we had electricity from approximately 261 down to the square, approximately Durling Drive down to the square, and approximately the railroad track down to the square, and approximately to the injector, and that was it. So we didn't have too many houses, and we had the electrical generator on Broad Street. Now, at 1930, if I'm remembering this correctly, in 1930, every household had one 1.5 electrical appliances in a home. In 2020, there are more than 50 appliances, 30 of which are in a kitchen.
Yeah, you don't think about it, but if you start going around the house and counting that stuff, yeah. Kind of like every house used to have one TV in it. You know,
Right.
Look today, every house has 4 or 5 anyway.
Right, and telephone,
Yep.
and
Same
one
thing.
dishwasher,
Yeah.
blenders and refrigerators, stoves, coffee makers, toasters. By the time you start, it doesn't take long to get up to 60.
Which, by the way, was all the stuff that we used to do repairs on, small appliances.
Right.
Nowadays, it's cheaper to throw them away and buy a new one.
Unfortunately, that's
That's
true.
exactly
That's right.
where we're
yeah.
at in that market.
And all the computer things and the things that are attendant to computers are all electrical as well. Now, you would think that with all of those all of those electrical appliances, that the most lucrative business would be in the electric business. However, you're telling us that one of the things that is stopping all of this is that you can't get them.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Well, that's the way it is right now. Now, hopefully, we'll be out of this mess in another year.
Well,
But we don't know. I mean, there seems to be shortages all over the world, so
well, somebody's not awake at the switch. I don't know who it is, but somebody's not awake at the switch. But that that brings me to the question that I wanted to ask you, however. Drew is a very fine young man who's working with television, your son. Would you recommend him to go into the electrical business?
no, he's more into the high-end tech end of it. This type of stuff, and he does a lot of audio stuff.
Well, let's take, for instance, he weren't.
Mm-hmm.
Would you recommend that he go into it?
I don't think he'd enjoy it like he does the tech end of it. I mean, there's plenty of openings for, plumbers, electricians, all these trades. So if somebody's not going to college, I mean, my gosh, everybody's hiring for the trades, And we need plumbers and, heating and AC people.
Well, who's doing electrics now? Anybody?
In town here?
Anybody?
Well, there's a few in town that are still doing it. I mean, Flath, his son is still in business here. Brad Brayman does a lot of work in the area here. Of course, Bruce Stahl has retired. We're closed down. Roger Blake passed away. Pug Weber just passed away a few weeks ago. We're
Not too many people.
We're aging out.
Not too many people. That's right. What are we going to do about that? I mean,
there'll be new ones coming up. I mean, there's.
You think there will be?
Oh yeah, and of course now with electric cars and everything, think about it. Every time you build a house today, I think it's going to be smart. You put an electric plug in the garage for an electric vehicle, because it's coming. I mean.
Yeah, it is.
But again, that's more demand on the electric system, which we know, like out in the West, they're already having problems before you put electrical cars onto the grid. So it's going to be interesting, especially with what's happening at Lake Mead and River Dam out there. I mean, they're down 150 feet, and they claim they don't have enough water to supply the electric now.
I read somewhere that they actually were able to see a car that was submerged. The car is about 5 feet tall, and the riverbank is something 100 some odd feet tall.
It is.
Down to
The
nothing.
actual drain, they were showing it on the news today, is actually showing for the first time. It looks like when you're looking out there that you're looking at a desert with just, a few water holes.
Instead of a
Massive lake.
massive lake. Well, that's wonderful. It's horrible, rather, I should say.
So I don't know. I mean, of course, Wadsworth's doing a great job. We've got the solar deals going now. So
And we got about 30 acres of solar.
is that the combined two of them?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's about 30 acres altogether, with 12 in one and 18 in another, something like that. Very close to that amount. And my understanding is that that generates about 8% of our electricity.
It's impressive.
That's very impressive. That's very impressive, and Of course, we get stand for some more sunshine, but it's a good way to get some electricity.
Supposedly, according to one of the inspectors I was talking to, they don't require the direct sunlight like they used to. So he said that's why they're putting them in a lot up in this area now. He said it used to be pretty much the older panels needed the direct sunlight, and you don't need as much of that
Now
anymore.
they don't have to have that now.
Yeah.
Now, had you become involved with solar panels at all before you left?
No, never really got into that. But you know, as we drive around, especially, we've noticed down in Amish country, evidently they're allowed to have solar panels because all their houses are being built with solar panels now.
Oh, really?
Yeah. If you drive down through there, you'll.
I never thought of that.
Yeah. So just about every house down there is putting solar panels on.
Oh, that's interesting. That's interesting.
Yeah.
They're way ahead of us.
But see, they're going to need people to install all that type of stuff too. So there's a big market. Plus, I guess the good aspect is the new appliances don't have the amperage draw that they used to. But like you say, 1.5 appliances to 50 appliances in a house, it's still a lot of difference.
50 might be even low. 50 might be even low. Now, did you have to know electricity to do what you did?
When I came into the business, Uncle Bruce was starting to talk about retirement. So I went over to like Barberton and Akron, and I took the test so that the business would own the license in case he did retire, which was a good thing that I did because we still had the license then for it. If I hadn't have taken that, we'd have lost our electrical license.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Which every year you're supposed to take a class, you know, with it's 8 credit hours now. But I was taking those up till this year.
You were?
Oh, yeah.
Tell us a little bit about your dad and your uncles. So you touched upon them, but tell us a little bit about their personalities and what they liked and what they didn't like and so forth.
I was going to say, Uncle Wes, you know, he had an airplane out at the Wadsworth Airport. And then it came to the point when he got older, he couldn't pass the eye exam, so he sold the airplane and he bought a Corvette. I guess he figured it's safer to drive on the road when you can't see. I don't know, but he bought that. But they never had any children, but they did a lot of things together, and they used to take that little airplane, that Cessna, and they'd fly down to the Bahamas in it.
Now, he married a girl from Worcester area, Chenevy?
That's it, yes, Mildred.
Mildred Chenevy, yeah. And how did they meet, do you know?
That I don't. Of course, you know, Wes passed away years before she did. And, she did pretty well up to about the last 6 months of her life. But.
Now, what about your other uncles and your dad?
Of course, Uncle Bruce, now, when he retired, they did have a place in Florida, so they lived down there part of the time, and they lived up here part of the time. They had a place that was south of Fort Myers. I can't remember the city, but they spent the winters down there, and then they had the house up here yet up on West Street. And then, of course, Elvira passed away first, and then Bruce a few years later. But
tell us about your dad.
Well, he had a nickname Beef, which pretty much tells you what that was about. He was a big guy. He loved baseball. He played baseball all through high school. He was a pitcher. After high school, he had his own team. And I guess that's where they spent the weekends, was at baseball games all the time. And then, of course, after they had us kids, I guess my mom put the pressure on him. You know, you can't be spending every weekend at the ballpark. So he kind of gave that up. But
now, he was ahead of me in school just a year or two. I never saw him ever lose his cool. Never.
No, he's a pretty laid-back guy.
Pretty laid back. And, of course, he was big enough that no one would dare
That's true.
mess with him either.
Yeah.
Because even though he was very peaceful kind of a person, you could just take one look at him and you would know in a second that he could probably just annihilate you with one blow, because he's big.
Yeah, big man.
He wasn't fat, he was just big. Big. Where did he get the name Beef, you know?
I don't know. His buddies must have given him that name, but it stuck with him for his whole life. I mean,
I never called him Eldon in my life.
No, everybody called him Beef. I mean, that was his
called him
nickname, and one of his buddies gave it to him, and it stuck.
It stuck. That's right. Now, his family.
My dad's family?
No. Yeah, your dad's family. You and your brother. That's it.
In our family.
Yeah.
Well, I had 2 sisters.
Oh,
Yeah, one sister's up in Minneapolis and the other one's down in the Carolinas.
okay.
There was 4 of us, total of 4 of us.
And who's the oldest?
I have an older sister, and then it was me, and then my younger sister, and then my brother.
Okay, I'll take care of that one. Let's get back into the appliance business. When you had your store here on High Street, you had an old washing machine in there, and you had an old refrigerator, didn't you? No, just a
See, I'm just trying to think. The old washing machine, which was a Lovell, which was actually, I looked up at the library, they're the first company that came out with a wringer washer. They were only in business a couple of years, and then they started making the wringer heads for Maytag and Easy. But I donated that to the Historical Society, so it's sitting up in the home up there. Oh, there was an old Speed Queen wringer washer also that I took up there.
Yeah, there were 2
But
things.
but that was electrified. This other one was a hand crank where you actually had to crank the paddles on the inside.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah, yeah. So you
didn't
put
know
your
that.
clothes in there, close the lid, and then you had a crank on it like this, and that's how it, it had like udders in there that moved back and forth.
That
Move the
took
clothes.
care of anybody having to do any exercise outside of
Well,
the...
I was going to say, I think the women were in pretty good shape if they.
Well, you better believe it, I would say. Now, how do they go from that to an electric, or rather one that does it all by itself?
Oh, the automatic?
The automatics. What do you call them?
Well, Maytag, of course, had the wringer, and then they went into the automatic washers, and they by far made the best washing machine out there. They were basic and simple machines. You paid more money for them, but when you bought one, you knew you had it for at least 20 years, which is not a lot of things you can say that about anymore. There's a lot of electronics in the new appliances, so hence they don't seem to hold up as long. You can get
No, they don't. No, they don't.
well, you can get power surges and stuff that'll burn up some of these electronic boards and stuff. So they're not mechanical like they used to be.
Did in any of your literature, did anything come out that's going to be beyond the automatic washing machine?
Not that I've really. I mean, of course, they came out with the front load washers a few years ago. As a water conservator, I mean, because they didn't use as much water. The problem is they didn't seem to hold up as good as some of the top load machines. They were very popular for about 10 years, but they're not as popular as they used to be.
One of the appliances that I think he used to sell were Mangles. Does that ring a bell to you?
Not when I was there, no.
Mangles are ironing devices.
Okay.
You put your shirt in and
Mm-hmm.
and it was a roller. They quit making them. Do you have any idea why they quit making those?
The handheld iron, I guess. I don't know.
It didn't. They must not have worked too well.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that as I say, I try to do a lot of reading. Of course, I don't do too terribly much of it because I fall asleep before I can read too much. But one of the things I just read too terribly long ago that they're thinking of making, and I don't know how they would do this. Maybe you can help me. They're thinking of making a washing machine that would wash the clothes, automatically transfer them to a dryer, and then the dryer, some way or another, would be able to fold them.
Oh, my Lord. That would be a hit, wouldn't it?
It would be a real hit, but I mean, is that...
I don't know. I mean, right now they've got washing machines that wash, and then you can turn it to a dry cycle, so you have one unit instead of 2. Problem is you can only have one load going at a time.
Yeah.
So those aren't real popular either unless it's a space issue. But
Did you have any of those?
no, I never really even sold them. They were kind of expensive, and most people, once you explained it to them,
They didn't want
they
them.
didn't want it.
Well, I can't even begin to fathom how they would be able to fold the clothes. But I understand that would be one of the biggest selling points that they could make something like that.
Well, Maytag had it was a drying, they called it a drying center. And it stood as tall as like a washer dryer stacked on each other. And after you got your clothes out of the washer, you put them on a hanger, excuse me, and you put them in this like closet, and you shut it, and it would have just a little bit of heat in there, and it would shake the clothes like this, and then supposedly you didn't have to iron them. Now those were popular probably 15 years ago. They sold for $1,400 or $1,500. We sold a few of them, not too many, but they never went over that well. They were very expensive.
Did it work?
Yeah, they did kind of work, but how many people are willing to spend, think about it, even back then, they were $1,400 or $1,500.
Yeah.
So it was a lot of money.
20 years ago, that'd be probably at least 3 or 4 times that
Yeah, it would.
right now. Right now. But they didn't work. What about the refrigerators?
Well, nowadays everybody wants ice and water in the door. And,
Yeah.
Of course, a lot of the popular ones have the refrigerators on the top, and then they have a middle storage drawer, which is temperature adjusted so you can control the temperature, and then the freezer's on the bottom. And they're nice, but there's several things. If door gaskets go bad, now you go from a refrigerator with 2 door gaskets to 4 door gaskets. Just more stuff that can really go wrong.
Yeah, anytime you have something extra, you have to pay extra
Yeah.
to have it repaired. That's right. Well, the reason I'm asking that question is that also the same article that I was reading or looking at the other day said that they have, and I don't happen to be a drinker, but they actually have a dispenser for cold drinks, that is alcoholic drinks, that you insert, and then this automatically mixes with ice and all this other kind of things. I suspect that would be too hard to make, but who on
They
earth
had
would-
it back in the 70s.
Oh, they did have that?
Oh yeah, because we actually had Frigidaire had refrigerators, and you'd put like concentrated orange juice in there, and then it would
Yes.
mix with the water and stuff and dispense. They had those back in the 70s.
Oh, they did have
Yeah.
them then, so this is not too far out.
Yeah, but it never went over real good, and it was kind of messy. Because you had the concentrate in
Yeah.
there, but they were popular for a couple of years, and it just kind of went away.
What is the one thing that was very standard on an appliance that you actually cherished because it was so good that it didn't cause a lot of problems for you?
Well, I don't know. Just looking back on my own life, self-cleaning ovens are kind of nice. You turn a switch and the oven's clean.
I can remember when they first
And
came out.
dishwashers. I wouldn't want to be you right now washing dishes.
Well,
To me that's worse than not having a microwave oven.
just about. The one thing that I would think that somebody like you who needs to know what people want, because that's what they'll buy. You sold us a refrigerator 31 years ago. It still works.
Yeah.
You told me that when we bought it, that it would last maybe 10 or 15 years.
That's the average life, Sometimes you get units that go longer.
Works perfectly. I'm 31 years old.
Wow. Don't move it. Don't move it.
we treat it with very, very
Yes,
much respect,
yes,
let me tell you, because
that's wonderful.
we want to make sure that it stays that way, particularly at this
What
age.
color is it?
We have wood paneling on the
Okay,
outside, so
okay.
I don't know what
I was
color
gonna say,
it is.
because back then, we had the avocado green, harvest gold, the copper tones.
This is probably a harvest. This is probably a harvest gold. Or
That was
something.
popular back then.
I would imagine. I'm not so really sure. Another question that I have regarding the appliances. You never carried, as I remember, you never carried anything such as irons or hair thingies or.
We did.
Oh, you did?
When I started down on the 153 Main Street store, we were selling small appliances and repairing them.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, I didn't
So the
know.
whole industry changed. When I was going to Akron U, they'd load up my car with motors. I'd take those motors over to Tyler Motor off of washing machines, have them, rewound, bring them back, and, we'd fix them up and put them back in the machine. Well, nowadays it's cheaper to buy a new motor than to have it rewound.
Wow.
I mean, so everything's changed. You don't repair as much
wow.
as you just buy new now.
Tyler up there on the end of Collier Road and
Yeah,
162.
162, correct.
Yeah. Now that, as a matter of fact, they used to be Akron Armature,
Hmm.
and they always did nothing but rewind the motors.
Yeah.
A friend of ours owned that. Yeah. And the third question is one that probably doesn't have an answer, but I always have questions that don't have any answers. Is there such a thing as planned obsolescence on some of these things that we say are no longer made nearly so well as they were a few years ago?
Oh, I think so. I don't
think
think they want them to last as long. I mean, these companies, they don't want appliances to last 30 years anymore. You know, they want to have you back in the store buying something new every 10 years or less, you know. And that's kind of what we noticed towards right before we closed, that washing machines, you were lucky on some of them to get 3, 4, 5 years out of them of service. And that's when I took on Speed Queen again, and we started selling Speed Queen because they were kind of built, and they still are, like the old Maytags. Very basic machines. They're not the water savers, so they actually wash. A lot of these new machines only put about this much water in them. And they still have normal, I call them normal, like a 30-minute wash cycle, not an hour and a half like some of these new ones. And some of these new washers, the wash cycle is an hour and a half long.
Wow.
Well, they're not moving a lot of water, so they just try to keep running it through there.
So you've seen a lot of those kinds of things that have changed.
Yeah.
And probably not for the better.
No. But then when it comes to electronics, I mean, look at the TVs, you know, versus back in the 1960s and 70s. Dad brought the first color TV home. It was for the Browns championship game. Old Westinghouse round tube. I think we had every neighbor in the neighborhood at the house. Nobody had seen color TV. And they were expensive back then.
Yeah, they were.
And quite honestly, they didn't, you know, have a real great picture on them.
Well, they had 3 colors, didn't they? Just only 3.
They had 3 colors, but I was trying to explain to Drew. I said, Drew, back when I was a kid, do you know what our remote control looked like? He says, no. I said, well, this is how it worked. Paul, get up and change it to channel 8. While you're up, do the fine tuning. You know, remember how we had to fine tune it?
Yeah.
He says, oh, by the way, while you're there, turn the volume up. And Drew just looked at me, shook his head. He says, you're kidding. I said, no, that was our remote control.
You were the remote control.
There's no such thing.
No, we didn't. We had only 3 channels at that time, too.
Yes, and look at all the channels, hundreds of channels now.
As a matter of fact, there's so many of them you don't know where they are.
You don't.
Let's get back to your family once again, because I think that this is one of the things that people really, really enjoy and appreciate. Your grandfather married and went to Niagara Falls.
On his motorcycle.
On a motorcycle.
With a sidecar. Well, it was 1914.
Yeah.
Took him a little over 3 days. He said the roads were basically dirt and mud and big holes in them. In fact, they had to change a tire once, but they went up there for their honeymoon, and Grandma said it always used to scare me riding in that sidecar, but he was a pretty adventurous guy. And then somewhere I've got a note on it at home, but I cut it out of a 1960s newspaper, and of course, remember, we had a motorcycle gang in Wadsworth, you know, motorcycle club. And my grandfather was part of that, and Marshal Lucas caught him speeding on Broad Street going through town. So he sentenced him, and I think it was Henry Boffman. They both got picked up at the same time to do traffic duty under the marshal's direction for 10 days.
Really?
So that was his sentence.
His sentence.
Yep.
Now he went to Niagara Falls. Then he had 4 children.
He had the 4 boys.
4 boys. He was small.
Yes, he was.
But his boys were big.
Yeah, they were. Yeah.
Where'd they come from?
I don't know. But you're right, he was short.
It was 5, 6, or 7.
Is that what he was? Yeah, he was short. Mm-hmm.
He always wears gray trousers and a gray shirt.
Mm-hmm. And suspenders.
Suspenders, right?
Yep. Had his suspenders on.
Had his suspenders, but the boys were all big.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and healthy looking too. I mean, they weren't fat. They're just big.
I just still remember putting his Christmas lights up at Christmas time. I mean, you remember those probably from seeing them up there.
Yeah.
But, and you just want, of course, nowadays you probably couldn't afford the electric bill, but I mean, every one of those bulbs were anywhere from 7 to 10 watt bulbs.
Yeah.
And on that one blue spruce there, we had 1,000 white bulbs, and then they would stay on for like 15, 20 seconds. They'd go off, and then it'd be it was outlined in red, and then blue, and then green. He had everything synchronized, for which in his day was something, really.
Oh, yeah.
But he was very fussy. When we took those lights down, we had to string them up through the basement, plug them in. Any bulb that didn't work came out, got thrown away, and every bulb that worked got unscrewed, and it got put in a wooden box where it kept all the blue, the red, the greens. So when we had to set the lights up for the next year, we had to get all these cables out and then screw all the bulbs in and check them before we took them outside.
That was your grandfather.
Mm-hmm. He's pretty particular.
He was very particular, very particular. The school that I was principal many years ago, 70 years ago actually, was the one in which he had put his first, my understanding was, I wasn't there of course, but he actually wired the entire school in Sherman, and it was the first school that he had wired, I think, by himself.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Well, what year would that have been? Do you have any idea?
1927.
Well, I'm surprised he'd do it by himself, but I'm sure he's capable of
Well,
doing it.
well, I misspoke. He was there himself, and he had helpers, obviously.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but he did because he signed on the little plate, W.S. Bicksler. He signed it himself.
I had actually found some pictures of his crew hoisting with block and tackle transformers up on the telephone poles.
Really?
Yeah. But think about that. He was here when electricity was just really starting.
Well, yeah. It's as a matter of fact, 100 years ago now, it was 1922, and the first electricity in Wadsworth came in 1916.
Now, he told me that they wired a lot of those houses over on Merriman Road, the big houses over there.
Oh, did he?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know about that.
We did
part.
several houses over there.
I would imagine he was probably one of the pioneers then.
Probably had to be in this area, yeah.
Because electricity wasn't around.
No.
People said, well...
Sure made our life a lot easier, though, didn't it?
I recently went to my alma mater in Baldwin Wallace, and the college started in 1845, and the buildings that they built were out of sandstone because of the Berea. And we were talking to some of the people who are students there right now, and I mentioned that one of the buildings, the science building, it's called Science Hall, had it's a three-story building. It had three outlets, one in the lower hall, one in the second story hall, one in the third. That was it.
That was it.
That was it. And they were placed there after the building was built, because the building was built in 1845. There was no electricity at that time. When did electricity first start coming into buildings? 60s probably, 1860 or something like that.
Yeah, it was, probably early.
In that area.
Yeah.
Well, so people said, well, how on earth did they run all of the things? There was nothing to run.
No, there really wasn't.
What would you run?
Well, think about it. A lot of the houses down here in the south end, they had 30 amp services in them.
Yeah.
If you got an electric range, there's 40 amps.
Plus the fact now we have, 400 amps going into the houses?
Oh, yeah, many of them today.
Yeah, we have 400 amps coming into ours.
Yep.
What are you going to do with the rest of your life?
Well, hopefully play a lot of golf. And I've always been a car buff, so I'm going to go to some car shows and try to enjoy myself that way. And
what kind of cars do you really like?
Well, currently I have an 87 Camaro. I bought it back in 1987. I think I hit 15 or 16,000 miles on it last year.
Oh, really?
And then I've got a Challenger Hellcat that I bought 8 years ago that I have, I think, 10 or 11,000 miles on it.
You know, for me, those are brand new cars.
Well, an 87, it's 35 years now, but yeah.
I like the ones in the 1920s and 30s.
There's a lot of them around yet out there.
They're beautiful
Yeah,
little
they
cars. They're beautiful little cars. I bought a 1931 Ford for $125, and 3 years later I sold it, and I was not able to get $50 for it, so I sold it for $45. Today, if I had that, it'd be $17,000. Paul, thank you very much.
Well, thanks
We've
for
come to
having
the end
me.
of our time,
Enjoyed
and
the
we
talk.
really, really needed to have the Bicksler legacy on tape because you people helped to make Wadsworth Electric what it is.
Well, thank you.
And you did a tremendous job. And in 107, pardon me, in 107 years, no complaints about anyone ever being in any way bamboozled.
No, we always tried to please people. I mean, 99% of them you can. There's always some that you can't, but
I realize that, but those people, no one can please. But you did it very well. You deserve all of the credit, and we wanted to make sure that your story got on Wadsworth history on film.
Thanks for having me.
We are at the end of it. And
Okay.
thank you again, Paul, for agreeing to come on and to give us the history of this wonderful, wonderful family.
Well, thanks for inviting me. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Yep.